think, new ground, and you've had the courage to break a very unfashionable new ground. I think many of us here would not have needed persuading of the interest and value of the building as you described, but you have certainly described them with erudition and wit. But may I now please propose a very warm vote of thanks for Dr. Webster for his talk.
Just how tiny the Georgian Hall is. Top floor of the house was for the servants' accommodation. And Rob and I are going to do a double act. I'm going to show you around the ground floor and tell you what was what.
The roasting oven does get hotter and later. So the one nearest Janice is the cooler of the two. But it's a bit like sort of driving a steam train. Sometimes it will be very, very hot. And at other times, you just can't get the heat into it at all, because we don't obviously light it in the morning if we're going to cook on it. And it depends what's happening outside. So if there's a drawer on the chimney, if it's a windy day, it'll just vroom. Yeah. But if it's a very still day, we can struggle. So we have had, on one baking session, we were doing biscuits, and they just weren't cooking, and we ended up, after about 3 hours, giving up and taking it to the cafe.
I think we've got to take a photograph of my back. Oh, definitely. Yes.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the chairman of the Georgian Society of East Yorkshire. We do hope that we will be able to recruit 1 or 2 new members.
I see you are sitting in a beautiful Georgian room, but it was originally a medieval red hall, and it was remodeled in 1760.
The only person
I'm Phil Thomas, stupid enough to live here, stupid enough to buy this place, and my husband Michael is in the kitchen probably slicing cake, the most important duty of the day, and the third member of the party in a way is our architect collaborator Kynan Simmons. And between us, we hope that Kynan and I will be able to answer any question, or if not, plausibly lies. We've been here exactly 6 years. To April 2017, we moved in. It used to be a very large establishment. The first record of this place is in King Edgar's famous document of 959. We're trying to organise the space in a way that suits the 17th century house. We're following the 17th century ideal in all the garden areas for a detached building, which was to have a garden, a court, which was the entrance point where the door was and your carriage could turn up. The mulberry, interestingly, is always the last tree we have to come into the I think on this side of the house we have the evidence of a predecessor. We know there were 3 messages on the side of the house in the early 17th century, a message being a dwelling house, its outbuildings and a garden. There were 3 messages on the side of the hall, and I think this that we have on this side a vestigial survivor of one of them. The ground floor on this side, the plan of it, is through that door, a small lobby with a door to the right going into what would have been the family's parlour, the hall, the living room, a door on the left going into the kitchen and the service rooms, the chimney stack in line with the door, and on the other side of the chimney stack, the staircase. But that's absolutely classic, past the lobby entry plan, very typical 17th century. And when Nicholas Arliss I died in the 1630s, he left an enormous estate between his 2 sons. And Nicholas II, one of those sons, already lived in Knedlington. So we assume he lived in one of the messuages on this site, and it's he who actually commissioned this house in 1649 and 1650. That was the house that was started, but in 1656, the gentleman building it, Nicholas Arliss, lost his wife. They'd been married for a very long time, and I suspect that at that point his energy went out of the project. Canal Street. What must this have looked like when most houses in East Yorkshire, apart from a few in the towns, were still being built of clunch or mud or timber, and there were still a lot of thatched roofs. We had to strip this quarter of the house out to get rid of the horrible modern walls and floor, and we discovered the framing of the staircase still there in the floor. One of the floor joists actually had the mark of one of the risers of the stairs, and the paint it had been painted with, and there were ghosts of risers in the plastering. And if you were high status, you came right into here. This room would have been known as the hall or the house body. This is the family living room. Yes. A bit like the Earls of Denbigh, who people, because of their heraldry, people call them the Habsburgs. This side of the shield is very easy, the wife. This is Ridley of Yorkshire, a family resident on the east coast. A silver shield with a red bull on a green mount, Ridley of Yorkshire. This half is a bit more difficult to pin down because it doesn't actually exist. This is the man's side of the shield, but there are 10 or 12 coats of arms in Britain, official ones, that have some or all of the combinations: a red ground, 3 charges, an engrailed fess, 3 mullets or some other decoration, but all in different combinations, and they are all the arms of families called Bacon. And we think that this is the arms of a gentleman in Beverley who co-opted it unofficially from various relatives.
There's quite a significant bow in that wall where the roof has been spreading over.
Nice piece of a 17th century slipware plate with a typical pie crust rim made by just pinching the clay, and that sort of slipware patterning is very typical of 17th century china. There's a medieval glazed floor tile, the edge of an 18th century pansion, lots of 19th century broken pieces. We find buckets full of it in the garden.
when he was endowed in 1834. He was succeeded by his son, who was the second John Scott, who had a nice big restoration.
Pleasure to introduce Professor Sarah Brown, who is the director of the York Glaziers Trust and very much involved with what's been going on at York Minster, for instance, particularly the Great East Window, which is very much overseeing all that, and so many other things. She is one of Britain's greatest experts on stained glass, and we're very pleased that she was willing to come and talk about something not stained glass.
Now, Peckitt is a fascinating person because his reputation has gone through all sorts of highs and lows. Glass painting of the 18th century was very much denigrated by the 19th century practitioners of the Gothic revival. Here, we're extraordinarily lucky to have in this chapel a complete glazing scheme of the 18th century. But first of all, a few words about William Peckitt. In my view, he is really an unsung hero because he was effectively entirely self-taught. He made this claim when he first advertised himself in 1752 in the York Courant. In his commission book, which is an extraordinarily important document for tracking his career, he listed over 315 approximately glazing schemes that he created across his whole career. And in the introduction to that commission book, he also says that he was self-taught, and this claim was reiterated on his behalf by his daughter Harriet when she wrote to the Gentleman's Magazine after his death. And I think this is an extraordinary achievement for a young man who did not come from an artistic family at all, but who taught himself this most demanding of crafts at a period where there were no longer scores of practitioners from whom he could learn. And the York scholar J.A. Knowles, in writing about William Peckitt, posited that he must have learnt from some of his predecessors who were practising stained glass at the tail end of the 17th century. But as Trevor Brighton showed, this chronology just cannot work. Henry Giles, the glass painter of York who died in 1709, had been dead many years when William Peckitt himself was born in 1731. Young William was clearly of a very serious academic and scholarly and artistic bent, and a very exciting discovery came about in the summer of 2019 when a notebook, which seems to have been written in about 1746, came to light in a sale room down in the south of England of William Peckitt as a 15-year-old, writing about an enormous variety of activities in the arts and sciences. He does a drawing and he records how you make an orrery, and he talks about the different ways in which you draw different plants and flowers. And of course, plants and flowers appear in some of his earliest work in stained glass. Unfortunately, there's very little reference in that notebook to glass. But certainly by 1751, Michaelmas of 1751, he maintains that at the age of only 20, he was already practicing making glass and painting glass. And then only a year later, he advertises himself as being based in Colliergate in York, available to make stained glass of all varieties. This relatively humble young man came to the notice of Dean John Fountain of York, but thank goodness he did, because Fountain was a very long-lived and long-serving Dean of York, and he promoted Peckitt and supported him in various ways, gave him access to his network of high Anglican churchmen, and through that connection, Peckitt got a lot of work.
So one of the things I always ask people to do is when they're coming into a church is don't look at the doors, don't look through the doors to see your friends and what's going on. Stop, take a minute, and look at these magnificent architectural bits. Then take a few minutes to have a look what's on those architectural bits. With the monks is there was a pecking order of monks. Bishop at the top, down the various levels, until you got, the young juvenile trainee monk who may have only been 8 years old. He was the third son he's put into the church. Evidence I've found is that Filey town, village, hamlet is in the East Riding, and it's in the wapentake of Dickory. This church is in the North Riding. The boundary is the ravine. Right, yes, I need it all down here for my last piece of graffiti. Excellent. I can now tell you something about all of you, but there is a which is not here. If some of you would like to come up and have a look. Very hard to see. Most people in Filey, even in the congregation, don't know it's there.
Well, that's the North Riding, that was the East Riding. Two ridings of Yorkshire Split Riding were built many years ago. Some are small farmhouses, some are small cottages, all very varied. Have a look on your way up. As you can see, our museum is small chunk cottages. One came this way and one goes out that way. Put together. If you look at this sign above that one of those doors, it says 1696. May the fear of God be with you. And then in 1696, that's when they modernised. They built it up. That takes it back to probably 1400s, late 1400s. But definitely medieval. Certainly this area was full of old fishermen and the old part of town. Some of them would have been shops, some of them would have been cobblers, some of them would have been grocers, some of them would have been from farms. You could get milk and cheese, and all these properties have somehow retained a little bit of its history. A lot of them, little villas again, or alleyways go back. As the fishermen had a family and the sons grew up, they'd build a little bit on the back of the house, they'd build a little house. This house owned all that property that they built Hook Street on. That was what you got. That's what I got, yes. What?
17. I think this makes about 17. Unit coming from Birmingham used the architect Charles Edge to draw up the first plans. Typical sort of town house really. Down below you've got an area with basements which contained rooms for servants, and indeed actually contained servants' hall too, so it's quite extensive basements and service areas here. Of course, what you might expect, you have a tea room there was promenading, and in the season there were concerts twice a day, light classical music was playing, and these I think were put up by a man who bought a house over here, but more of that in a moment. What I came to look at here was 2 or 3 houses. The White Lodge Hotel, I don't know who it was originally built on, but certainly
They're nice, aren't they? March away.
Accommodation.
I think more open anyway, so it's like you and spoke.
The anthem this evening is Teach Me, O Lord, by Thomas Atwood.
invitation to preach in Cottingham as you prepare to rededicate the memorial to Thomas Thompson, the first Methodist MP to sit in the House of Commons from 1807 to 1818. He was described, this is in the Dictionary of Methodism and a book about Parliament at that time, as not an eloquent or fluent speaker, but always heard with respect because of his judgments and his acknowledged uprightness and integrity. I feel endeared to him because of what's described as his active concern for the poor of Hull, on whose behalf he experimented with small holdings.
Sing
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this concert. I'm Roger Lewis, the chairman of the Georgian Society of East Yorkshire that is helping put this event on. That particular item was Hymn for Christmas Day, Hymning Seraphs Wake the Morning, by a little-known composer, Thomas Taylor of Chester, using the theme from Handel's keyboard variations on the harmonious blacksmith. The music to the next item, A Virgin Most Pure, you may never have heard before. It is from a manuscript by Sarah Ward of Hooton Pagnell near Doncaster that Julian discovered in a second-hand bookshop in Beverley.
Virgin most pureness of prophets to tell, hath brought forth a baby, and six have befell, to be a redeemer from death and sin, which pardons transgression, which pardons transgression, and granted us sin. Therefore be merry, sorrows aside, Christ Jesus our Saviour was born on this time.
The following 18th century arrangement of the tune Helmsley to Lo He Comes with Clouds Descending has a slightly different rhythm from the setting in the modern hymn book.